letting go has to be practiced. It has to be proactively done so that you can wire your mind in such a way so that you actually experience the results of letting go. It's extremely practical. It's not just this sort of new agey thing where we kind of let go and then that's that. It's something that actually has to be taken into account in our everyday life and mastered, really. Again, it kind of requires that sort of long-term vision, which I talk about in a lot of my videos. How do you really want to be in like 20 years from now, 10 years from now? It requires that kind of vision for your life. Do you want to be very like emotionally dependent and clingy and just like grasping on to stuff for security, or have that ability to kind of go with life, move with life rather than always fighting against it? Do you want to be able to really listen to your own body, to your own intuition, or do you want that all to be kind of blocked up by just unnecessary emotional attachments? So keep in mind that this is like an actual thing to really practice, and you got to kind of wire your mind in a way so that you can get these kinds of benefits. So I want to talk about what attachment is for a little bit, and then we'll move on to just understanding how do we really start letting go. But we have to understand attachment if we really want to understand letting go, because that's really the thing that begins to block us. So attachment is basically emotionally clinging to people, things, ideas, or outcomes for security and identity. And it kind of just stems from fear, from this sort of lack of self-worth, from unresolved childhood needs, a lack of attunement, a lack of emotional connection, maybe total neglect. And our body kind of just remembers this stuff. Our conscious mind doesn't really remember it, but our body gets imprinted by these sort of experiences. And then we kind of find ourselves, especially if you've ever studied attachment theory in relationships, we find ourselves behaving in certain ways that are due to previous experiences, right? So of course, previous experiences impact how we are now in ways that we're typically not even consciously aware until we actually start to do some meditation, until we actually start to learn more about our own psychology and psychology in general. Until that moment comes, we're kind of just a slave to a lot of our conditioning without even being aware of it. And we're actually kind of telling ourselves that we're not, because to actually mention that is hard. And to be honest about that is hard. It's not something that we really want to admit. And of course, this whole paradigm of being attached out of, fear and unresolved emotional needs and things like that, our society really reinforces this through a lot of the illusions that it concocts in its sort of narratives, like materialism or relationships or success metrics. Because there's always this kind of chasing for more. There's just this nonstop chasing, which is just like complete garbage. It's just this sort of illusion that we're all conditioned with, and we all kind of reinforce it within each other, right? We're actually just kind of reinforcing each other's illusions. This is a big thing that goes on in socialization. So there's a lot of consequences to attachment, which is, of course, suffering. Like the Buddha said, attachment is the root of suffering. And I'm going to talk about that for a tiny bit. A lot of our sort of emotional suffering, or fear, anxiety, disappointments when things don't really match our expectations, a lot of this is actually unnecessary, meaning that it's something that we are generating unconsciously. Again, keep in mind that idea of being a slave to conditioning, especially past conditioning, and we're not really, it's unconscious. So a lot of this is actually unnecessary, and it's something that we're doing, meaning that it's something that we actually have to take responsibility for. This is probably about 90 to 95% of the suffering that we actually experience in our lives. It has not as much to do with the external world and more so to do with our relationship to it and our reactions to it. Of course, the external world matters. I'd never throw that away entirely, but most of our experience of suffering is found in how we are relating to it and how we go about interpreting it. And you can't really think your way out of this kind of stuff as well. See, I don't want people to kind of walk away with a shallow understanding and think that I'm just telling you to change your thoughts and then you're not going to suffer. No, most definitely not. Again, you need that sort of very long-term vision for your life. This is a shift in being, a shift in like the structure of your psychology. It's definitely not change your thoughts and then like that's it. That's such a half-ass way of approaching this. Just get that one out of your mind. This is a massive shift in your being, the whole essence of what you are. It's a shift in your relationship to your instincts, your relationship to your thoughts, the quality of your thoughts. How accurate are they? The shift in your consciousness, how you relate to your emotions. It's a shift in your body as well, since the mind and body are not separate. There's no distinction, there's no boundary separating them whatsoever. What I'm saying here really requires a lot of work. It requires intentional effort over time, typically for like decades. This is really what I'm pointing to here. So a lot of this suffering that we experience is just very not necessary. It's self-generated unconsciously, and then we project the causes of it onto the external world. If only it was going the way that I wanted it to go. If only I got the things that I want. You see, the problem here is that we're doing this in an unconscious fashion. And of course, our unconscious likes to remain unconscious. That's a tricky part of this, is that it doesn't want really to be brought out to light. The shadow likes to remain in the darkness. The devil and our own internal corruptions, the devil, I'm using it metaphorically, it all kind of likes to remain in the shadows. This is why, for example, whistleblowers in society, whenever they, do their whistleblowing, are they met with love and praise by, let's say, the organization in which they're exposing? Of course not. They're kicked out. They're called traitors. This is like the textbook definition of ego. You start pointing to its corruptions and its unconsciousness, and it reacts like a kid who doesn't get what it wants on Christmas. Again, corruption likes to stay in the shadows. The shadow likes to remain hidden. The unconscious likes to remain in the dark. The devil likes to remain in the pitch black. All this stuff is kind of pointing to a particular dynamic that's going on within human psychology that's leading us to a lot of unnecessary suffering and delusion, essentially. It's keeping us in survival mode. It's keeping us in a lot of unneeded struggle. And this kind of really limits our freedom. So it holds us back from, of course, growth. It holds us back from raising our consciousness. It holds us back from seeing life clearly. It holds us back from truth. It holds us back from deep, meaningful, lasting connections. Super counterintuitive. It holds us back from actually really surviving in a way that is simply very beautiful. It holds us back from surviving in ways that are caring, compassionate, curious, etc., conscious. It holds us back from our own self-actualization and self-transcendence. So we're just like continuously shooting ourselves in the foot without ever wanting to acknowledge that we're even doing so, because to do so would be painful. And we don't want to feel that pain. That's not something that we're very interested in actually doing. So of course it gets projected outwards, it gets denied, it gets repressed, etc. So letting go is not about rejecting or becoming indifferent, but approaching life with openness and trust. Learning to let go of attachment is more so like opening up to the experience that we're having, opening up to the feelings, the felt experience that we're having right now, opening up our body, really moving into it, living from within the body. And a core part of this is integration. It's really integrating every aspect of human life, integrating our connection and our need for achievement, our need for good food and water, our need for all sorts of stuff. It's this full integration of our being, integrating gut, heart, mind, consciousness. It's all this stuff kind of working together to actually serve our long-term development. Keep that in mind. Long-term development. Really keep that in mind. So here's some steps to kind of just beginning to let go of attachments. Really just some core principles is, first of all, awareness. And it's easy to really think that you're aware, but you're not. You're in this sort of illusion right now of, I'm aware of my experience. Actually, you're kind of lost in a lot of unconscious programming most of the time. About 95% of the time, you're not present, you're not aware of the sensations in your body, you're not grounded in experience, you're just lost in thought. So you're not really deeply aware of your experience, you're aware of it only on a very shallow level. So actually beginning to apply awareness through to our direct experience, typically through a meditation practice, right? Structuring in that time every single day. This is kind of how you begin to make those sort of lifts, those sort of weight lifts that get you to where, you're ideally trying to move towards, to get you towards that long-term vision, right? That repetition is actually needed. That just genuine practice, right, in a very sincere way is needed every single day for the most part. Yeah, basically every day. Acceptance is really important, so just kind of acknowledging impermanence and how nothing lasts forever. Right? Learning to just accept the arising and passing nature of life. Learning to just accept feelings arising and passing. Everything's always in this state of flux and flow and change. Impermanence doesn't mean that, at one point this video will end and then you'll go on to the next one, or this person will enter your life and then they'll leave. Of course, yes, this is a very obvious example, but reality itself, it is in this constant state of flux, flow, and change. Cells are moving and dancing. Atoms are vibrating. Our sensations are constantly arising and passing in your body. Just focus on your hand for a little bit and notice all the complexity going on in your hand. How much sensation is just arising, passing, and moving. How much energy is actually moving through your hand right now. The second you start to just focus on it and feel into it, just applying attention to it, right, mindfully, and just kind of feeling into it. So many sensations arising and passing. There's a lot of complexity there. The label hand just kind of simplifies it to a 4-letter word. So practicing gratitude as well, essentially just over time wiring your mind to actually just enjoy what's happening, regardless of what's happening, learning to just embrace what's happening with an open heart, learning to actually have your heart open to life. And let me explain to you some of the logic of what I'm actually saying here when it comes to opening up your heart. So this doesn't mean new age, airy-fairy, open up your heart, but when your heart is closed, there's literally a contraction in your chest. The muscles actually start contracting. There's repressed emotion there, and you're kind of holding it shut because your heart's an actual energy center. It's intelligent. It has neurons. It communicates to you. It's not just a stupid thing that just pumps blood. It's highly intelligent. It's actually giving you messages. Your whole body's intelligent, right? So shift that paradigm from the body's a stupid hunk of meat to it's intelligent. So opening up the heart really involves actually embodying this space as well, living inside of it rather than having it feel cold and numb and dull and dead. There's no sensations there. Learning to actually live from within this space, the whole body really, but the heart specifically for opening up the heart in this space and then allowing it to kind of open up, right? How does your heart space feel right now? Does it feel numb, dull, closed? Do you feel sensations in there? Does it feel alive? What's really going on in there right now? Right? Really just observe it directly. Right? Is it flowing with sensation, or is it kind of are you afraid to open it? Is it kind of clamped shut? So moving on is just cultivating self-love and inner peace to reduce dependence on external things. Practicing self-compassion as well, learning to open up your heart to your own pain. Typically when we have our own pain, we hate it. We don't like our own pain, right? We stub our toe. Oh, fuck. We hurt our knee. Oh, I hate my knee, right? We don't have compassion for our own pain, right? We want to avoid it. We don't really like it at all, right? Especially our emotional pain. And a lot of our emotional pain comes from childhood, repressed stuff that we just simply couldn't handle. And our consciousness kind of gets frozen in time almost, right? Essentially, when we repress something, that sort of energy just remains there, right? Let's say we repress something at the age of 4, it kind of holds our 4-year-old consciousness, right? That sort of inner child is there. So we're not really relating to the pain of a grown man or a grown woman. We're actually relating to the pain of a child still living inside of us, right? So what would you do if there was a child that was in pain? Would you yell at it and call it stupid? Or would you hug it and nurture it and actually just give it the care and connection that it needs and allow it to kind of feel safe and grounded? Because kids can't regulate emotions by themselves. They need their caregiver to actually be there, helping them to feel safe and secure. The caregiver is essential for the regulation of emotion within children. So the role of mindfulness here is actually really big. You got to learn to just observe yourself without judgment. Just watch yourself. You're always judging yourself. You're always criticizing experience. Your mind's doing all sorts of of corrupt stuff. You might not want to admit that, but it is. And you gotta kind of just release this needs to always be controlling it, to be judging it, criticizing it. Essentially, it's like you're just like asserting your will onto it and controlling it. Just learning to mindfully watch, right? There's a good time to assert, but a lot of the time, you're not in asserting mode. There's no need for it. It becomes neurotic, actually. So just spending time to learn, just watching what's going on without judgment, just observing, grounding into the body, just feeling, being in the body, focusing on sensation, right? And then allowing that to kind of open you up, kind of moving beyond even just the limitations of mind itself. So there's a lot of benefits to actually doing this work. Of course, something like emotional freedom, sense of personal growth, improved relationships. Overall, every category of your life gets better because we're changing your mind. We're changing your consciousness. And this is like the thing that's driving every category of your life, whether it's your career, your relationships, your personal growth, your happiness, right? It's your being, right? The whole thing. This is what's driving your life. We're changing you, well, then we're changing your life. Again, letting go is a thing that you got to practice. I want to really kind of just keep that in your mind. That think of letting go as an actual, like, just notice throughout the day when you're like potentially angry at something unnecessarily, right? Very unnecessary anger. There is a place for anger, right? There's a place to feel angry and then potentially set a boundary. It's a useful emotion. If you can't feel your anger, there's actually a problem there. There's a time to just notice, like when you're getting unnecessarily angry or frustrated, something doesn't go your way, right? And there's nothing you can do. And just noticing you can let go of that. Or you're overthinking on something, noticing that you can just observe that and just kind of let go of it, right? Practicing letting go proactively. Look for actual practical places in your life where you can let go and practice that. That's how you kind of begin to make that shift. So even just surrendering control. Surrendering control connects you to the flow of life. When you're always trying to control everything, you're actually interfering with the flow of life, and you're actually missing a lot of the beauty of life, to be quite honest. You're really missing the intelligence of life, like the metaphysical intelligence of the present experience itself. You're missing it because you're always just in the ego. You're always controlling and dominating and asserting yourself onto the present for survival needs, survival purposes. Learning to let go of control over time allows that sort of intelligence to move through you, allows the flow of life to move through you. It allows the energy in your body to just move through you without resistance, without struggle, without blocks. It opens you up to life. Moving on is just a very advanced tip that I actually want to give you. So all this talk of letting go of attachment can create a couple issues. So for those of you who are actually really deeply committed to this kind of psychological and spiritual work, I want you to listen to this one closely. There comes a point in this journey where the distinction between detachment and attachment collapses entirely. Essentially, this is a duality that is a complete construct of the mind. To detach so deeply that you're no longer afraid of or avoidant toward attachment is the goal. You're so detached that you're not afraid to become attached. This is very different from the sort of starting position where we begin from, because there we're kind of attached mainly out of just like clinging and holding in fear. Whereas this sort of higher level of attachment is more so just the essence of life moving through you to pull you towards certain things, whether it's a person, an opportunity. And then when you guys split ways, right, you're not afraid of the grief that comes. You're not afraid of the loss. You're not afraid to gain things and lose things, because this is life. This is duality. You win some, you lose some. You're not afraid of this. You're not always acting out of fear, right? You're afraid of the ups and you're afraid of the downs. You're afraid of the positive feelings. You have the overwhelming feeling of happiness. You can't even really let yourself fully bask in it. And then you're afraid of the lows as well. You get something that you really want, and then you're scared about when it's going to go. You're always neurotically kind of wanting to hold on to it because you're afraid of it leaving. And then again, it doesn't bring you any happiness because you're stuck, always trying to just maintain it. And then it goes, and then you're just in a lot of unnecessary suffering once again. And let me kind of define unnecessary suffering a little bit in a more direct way. Simply resisting what is. The byproduct of just resisting what is. The feeling of grief, the feeling of sadness, the feeling of loss, these are all normal, healthy aspects of life. That's not the suffering that I'm talking about. Of course, it can be uncomfortable, but once you really learn to ground deeply into these things, it actually starts to become quite pleasurable to actually move away from the present moment, to become so not worth it and so uncomfortable that you just begin to realize that regardless of what's happening, if I can be fully grounded in it, this is the lasting satisfaction that I'm really looking for. This is what I am really after in my life. How do I just be very grounded in the moment, not needing to fight it, learning to be open to it regardless of what comes my way? Of course, you can still improve it. If you have some kind of health condition, you can heal. If you need to fix your financial problem, you can do that. If you have a relationship problem, you can still fix it, but you're just not stuck in always just like survival mode. You learn how to just kind of begin to move beyond that. So again, this is to detach so deeply that you're no longer afraid of attachment. In this space, attachment is no longer an issue because your sense of self and peace aren't tied to any external outcome or relationship. It's true freedom. It's the ability to fully engage with the world without fear of losing yourself in it or losing your peace. That's it for this video. If you're interested in working with me one-to-one, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Take it easy.